We're delighted to welcome you for this second conversation on Korea's compressed modernity.
And we are so grateful to be joined by Seoul National University Distinguished Professor of Sociology, Chang Kyung-Sup.
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me second time. And I'm so glad that I'm talking to you again.
Yes,
Exciting
sir.
moments. Yes.
Thank you so much. So the first program with Professor Jang was titled Consequences of Korea's Compressed Modernity, and that was streamed in 2022.
And that program was a runaway success, accumulating almost 4,000 views. That demonstrates the widespread interest in Professor Jang's work.
So when Professor Jang told us that he had a new book coming out, we jumped at the chance to do a program. If I were to hazard a guess as to why there was so much widespread interest in this, I think it's because Professor Jang provides a useful lens to view the puzzling and intriguing aspects of Korean society, often stemming from this collision between the traditional and modern values. Korea's rapid modernization has produced all sorts of social complexities that are evident in people's daily lives, from school to work to family life. And in this new book, right here, Professor Jang speaks to the notion that Korea's dynamism flows from the ways it tackles these social challenges. In other words, it's not all bad news.
That's right. And there's so much to learn and discuss. But first, we'd like to thank our corporate sponsors and our individual members for their generous support, which has made this program possible.
And here's a reminder that we are welcoming your questions live. So please send those throughout the program to policy@koreasociety.org. After the moderated discussion, our policy program officer, Chelsie Alexandre, who's waiting in the wings, will take the screen to convey your questions. And with that, we're going to begin. And Toby, it's over to you for the first question.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And Professor, can we start with your inspiration and motivation to write this book? And can you please give us a little refresher about the definition of what compressed modernity is?
Okay. In 1999, I published the first major paper on compressed modernity. It was entitled "Compressed Modernity and Its Discontents." And I wrote this paper because of all the social and other, the crisis arising, in connection with this financial crisis of 97-8. Actually, as actually, a sociologist analyzing this Korean society, especially its, structural contradictions, I was a bit shocked at the fact that these social, contradictions and problems accumulated behind this rapid, economic development, other transformations, well, actually got detonated in connection with this financial crisis. In other words, all these social problems actually, were translated into all this crisis, not purely as social phenomena, but as manifestation side effects of this financial crisis. So this was a bit, problematic, scientifically speaking, actually, because I was expecting that. I wouldn't like to say it, but I was worried in the early to mid 90s that Korea was developing fast, but on the other hand, Korea was not really, paying sufficient attention to all the social and other, contradictions behind this. And then I can, compare the situation that, this person, patient, this accumulated, illness symptoms were actually got into this traffic accident. Okay, so this traffic accident got complicated with this internal, illness. So the shocks to Korean society of the financial crisis were much more, serious than those of the other societies going through this financial crisis. So In hurry, I had to write this paper on contextual modernity. But on the other hand, I had this, the mission to write this issue on this issue from a more long-term structural perspective. So this was actually the book was planned like almost 3 decades. So now the book is fully is full account of these contradictions and other side effects of compressed modernity. And maybe I've spent too much money on the first question, but let me just move to the basic recapitulation of the compressed modernity. Let me just give you an analogy. The compressed modernity is like a person eating too much food of too many different kinds within a short time. Okay,
That's
so
really good.
you can enjoy. Okay, you can get yeah, fat and etc. But on the other hand, if you eat food that way, then you're not going to enjoy the kind of the cultural aspects of eating food and associating with your friends in that process. On the other hand, you will have very high likelihood of suffering from the indigestion and other problems, right? So maybe eating a lot different kinds of food within a short time may have been necessary as a matter of survival in some aspects. But on the other hand, you had a lot of this, price to pay, a lot of side effects of that. So that's compressed modernity, and that's why I, talk a lot about the side effects, problems, compressed modernity, not just about the compressed achievements of
Right.
South Korean society. Yeah.
Perfect. I love the metaphor. No notes. So I suppose that you completed writing this book before last winter's political crisis that was instigated by former President Yoon Suk Yeol declaring martial law. But I think that your book provides a lot of insight into Korea's democracy, which is advanced in so many ways, and yet it has experienced a lot of turbulence, two presidential impeachments just within the last decade. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Um, the press, the political press was quite excited about the political events, especially in connection with what I wrote in the book. The two chapters, the first chapter is entitled Borrowed Democracy, State Projected Politics, and Institutional Functional Conflations. Here I'm talking about Korean democracy, institutionally copied after this American model in a short time. But there is the civil society, weak civil society, even actually destroyed civil society in this post-colonial period and war, etc. So, what is democracy going to represent if civil society is weak? And then it couldn't, democracy, politics, the formal democracy ended up actually being, you know, dominated by the elites, especially political, legal, and intellectual elites. So democracy became a very state-centered affair. Democracy was representing the state. So it's like a big screen in which the state is projected. So in this process, a lot of these sports, liberal civil society professions like law, the universities and and other media, all these institutions, not all of them, but many elites, members, and organizations of these supposedly civil society liberal institutions were actually helping out the state to manipulate politics that way. So one of those professions is lawyers, especially prosecutors. And then we also have problems with this media and etc. A lot of these academics, etc. So that's the first chapter. The second chapter is entitled Normal Corruption, subtitled Utilitarian Institutional Dualities and Technocratized Authoritarian Justice or Injustice. The Western institutions adopted by Korean society and government, they were adopted when these institutions were actually prepared in Western society, in many Western societies, in order to preserve and reproduce the desirable conditions they have achieved after many years of economic development and social and political efforts. So it's nice to have those things, not formally, but the thing is that these institutions, adopted, copied institutions, are not quite actually relevant for solving immediate problems of South Korean society after colonial, domination, after war, etc. Right? So Koreans had to solve the immediate practical problems in their own ways. So they ended up actually, inventing it's kind of a lot of these institutions and practices and relationships and even ideologies, which are not consistent with these liberal, institutions they adopted from the West. So we have like, for instance, our industrial, organization, Jebel, they are, great in terms of achieving industrial miracles, etc. But we still have problems about the governance structures. Also, in our social service sectors like education, medical service, and welfare provision, etc., we didn't really have enough social resources. The government didn't want to actually spend too much money for those. They wanted to concentrate in economic investment. So they wanted to mobilize civilian partners. But we didn't have too many rich willing and enlightened civil society actors to provide all these social services as non-profit duties. But institutionally speaking, in our law, these are actually defined as non-profit sectors, like in many Western countries. So instead, the government, in this complex situation, the government had to manage this contradiction in terms of actually allowing a lot of these industrial and also social service providers in pursuing and carrying out their duties and services and realizing their practical profits in various flexible ways, oftentimes actually in various illicit ways. So this corruption is not just a moral matter, but it's very much technical matter in Korean context. So in order to manage this legally problematic ways of solving practical problems, the lawyers, including the prosecutors and judges, had to be very flexible as well. They are supposed to mess up this way of solving the practical problems. So, but on the other hand, and these the elites in industrial production and the social service will end up becoming their clients anyhow, right? So we have this order of normal corruption, and nevertheless we have been able to solve not only solve problems, but we have become great in terms of achieving world rapid, the fastest economic growth, and also our education has ended up actually making Korean people to be world most highly educated. Almost everyone goes to school, the university, while there are a lot of these private universities. Our universities are mostly private, and too many of them have been, charged with this a lot of these legal problems, right? So and the situation hasn't been really fundamentally solved.
Right.
So here again, the lawyers, the prosecutors, have been acting like technocrats in economic social policies. So if you these practical problem solving, also the state projective politics, the kind of the ruling order of our the government and economy and society. So if you are part of this legal profession, especially prosecutor, you are supposed to maintain close communication with the government and technocrats, and these governments even will send the intelligence the agents to these offices to check whether these legal lawyers and prosecutors, even judges, are doing their duties properly. So in this way, now with the history changed, and this the order I just mentioned was more typical during the military era. But in 1987, we became formally democratized or re-democratized. So by which military was evicted. But on the other hand, all this state projected politics and this is normal corruption in industrial production and social service provision, and these orders haven't really been fundamentally rectified.
Fascinating.
Instead, a lot of the elites wanted to somehow capitalize on this structure, and then somehow this group of these political politicized prosecutors ended up becoming the core force of the conservative political fictions. And so one of them was Yun, and then it was not only Yun, person, but he was surrounded by a lot of these people who were willing to actually share all the perks coming out of this, the order. So we still have big, actually, structural reform to be done in this respect.
So
And the
that's
answers are not coming from the Western social sciences.
so that's a
Doesn't
perfect
make sense to you.
transition
Yeah.
because I want to ask you about. I want to fast forward to today and talk about these problems. The political problem has been more or less solved, right, through a democratic election, and yet the structural issues remain, right? So I want to ask you for your opinion about how the present government, the administration of President Lee Jae-myung, looks at the risks and deals with the challenges coming from compressed modernity.
Um, I have very interesting impression about the new president. I mean, in general, I mean, like the media in Korea and internationally, I am quite relieved at the current the process of actually dealing with this political crisis and other social and economic confusions and, and side effects. But let me uh, tell you my impression about him as a very self-convinced intellectual. Actually, I mean his cabinet meeting is running many very long the hours in which he wants to talk a lot of fundamental things, and he's got some, not only opinions but also he's got answers and etc. But it seems that he has been thinking about Korea, from a very unique perspective. Built perspective he has developed through his own struggles as kind of poor country boy growing up in countries, and also working as a teenager, the factory worker, and also human rights lawyer, and also politician with a lot of conflicts with this, the conservative factions, etc. Right? I am actually very much impressed at the fact that he has been addressing some issues which are rarely actually addressed by ordinary politicians. For instance, the the safety issues, the industrial accidents, injuring and killing a lot of people, and he's talking about this safety issue as class issue. Actually, he's thinking that these class inequalities and these contradictions, Korean this capitalism is embedded in this the structure, social structure of exposing workers to this with this, some kind of disadvantaged backgrounds. Right now, it is actually a lot of foreign workers with problematic visa status, especially. So he's, I mean, so I actually the chapter, 7 of my book is entitled "Complex Risk Society," subtitled "Risk Components of Compressed Modernity." In the chapter, I am actually arguing about this aspect of Korean capitalism. Okay. So, and also he recently he is in love with his Korean, cultural sectors. Not only in terms of Korean culture, being showing a lot of what is called soft power of Korea, and also making a lot of foreign currency out of that, developmental side to it. I mean, he is saying that this is important, but on the other, he's been saying to people close to him that there is this cultural and philosophical side of it. Then these social messages presented in these cultural sectors are so important society. So we have to respect that. And so he as a governor of Gyeonggi province and mayor of Seongnam city, he tried to develop some program to offer some kind of basic income to this artist and other cultural sector, the people. And he's saying that this culture is important in Korea as a civilizational property, because obviously this is an indirect way of saying that Korea has this limit in developing its own dignifying philosophical and cultural values, and etc. So that's exactly what I wanted to actually discuss in chapter 5 of this book, which is entitled "Reflects Post-Coloniality, Intellectual and Cultural Contradictions of Compressed Modernity." Okay, and I don't think the president, read my book. Okay, I don't think he had time to read it, and I don't even think that he knows about this book yet. Right, but on the other hand, I mean, I am so surprised at this, president, talking about these issues out of very much, enlightened intellectuals. I have high respect of him as a devoted intellectual in that way. But I don't think he's been systematically trained as social scientist, but he's a lawyer, and he's gone through the Korean society, with his flesh, his body, right? But let me just emphasize this, that I've been living in Korea as a sociologist at Seoul National University now almost 35 years, and I have a big problem with the way social science practiced in Korea. I mean, we have these PhDs from the best universities, especially in American best universities, and then we are, teaching the knowledge learned from there to our students. So, in terms of actually practicing some kind of institutionalized, social science and other fields of knowledge, we are actually second best in the world because we have this such, talented, well-educated, teachers, knowledgeable about all the best, the state of the art, social science knowledges. But on the other hand, we don't research too much about Korean society, actually. Korean economic system is understudied. Even Korean social system is understudied, etc. Mm. So whenever we have crises, problems like this, social scientists are not really effective in giving some answers to this crisis. So, so I'm quite, sorry actually to those people, ordinary citizens about this, and also in other, sectors in society who should expect better services, better academic intellectual services from us.
Right.
This is not the best way to answer your question, but I just wanted to mention this interesting.
No, that's really important. Thank you for talking about
and
that.
it creates a very nice segue to sort of your research and your focus on not just the powerful in government and politics, but also the impact on ordinary people. And so I have a question related to your chapter 4, in which you write that lifetime employment has become elusive for many South Korean workers, and that they've experienced job instability because of a series of breathtaking shifts that have taken place in all industries within their working life. I think that's really interesting, and it's really helpful to look at these types of large social dynamics from the perspectives of ordinary people, and you address this. But can you explain that a bit more?
People, ask these questions. I mean, Korea has developed so much, and also it is still, doing great in industrial, production and other, even its cultural industry going, strong, etc. And still, South Koreans are unhappy. They are talking about, hell jobs, and they are, recording world, the worst level of, suicide, and also, fertility rate is so low, etc. Why, why are these contradictions?
Yeah.
Here, and then, never actually go away. And actually, I think you have to ask questions different ways, actually. It is not, you should not ask, questions like, why Koreans are unhappy, even when the economy is great, and there are a lot of other, nice, aspect of Korean society. But rather, we have to ask, what are the side effects of developmental compression? What are the costs, risks of, the problems of arbitrarily compressing the economic and other, places, and practice of change. This is like, I mean, you can get better scores at school by skipping your sleep, for instance, right? By sleeping 3 or 4 hours only, and then, studying hard, and you can get better scores than your classmates. Or your children get smarter if your children are sent to, English, the kindergarten, from the age of 4 or 5. and then they will be, end up becoming, the smarter earlier than others. But you cannot avoid these side effects, the problems of this compression, arbitrary way of achieving things, right? So I think, in a sense, our developmental compression had a lot of these social side effects, programmed social side effects even. So I have different, research projects. I have written a book entitled "Developmental Liberalism in South Korea." This is about social policy liberalism of developmental politics for developmental state. So Korea is developmentally liberal as compared to the United States being liberally liberal. For instance, we have been, developing our economy in a very aggressive way, etc. Right? So, in this process, we have been able to, restructure and develop our industry so fast, and we didn't really reserve any, aggressive measures to achieve this, including exposing our working population to all kinds of, risks, including the very high likelihood of being eased away because their job skills are not, relevant anymore. Okay, so now United States government, American government is asking Korean, industries to come over to help revive their industries, right? So Moscow, making American shipbuilding great again, kind of, phenomena, has arisen that way. But on the other hand, we're talking about Korean workers, having trouble with maintaining their job status, despite they are very experienced. The only problem is that their industries, the skills in which they used to, have the function, job functions, are not really, kept important anymore. Okay, so this is all about the achievement of the Korean industrial miracle in terms of rapid economic restructuring, maybe unprecedentedly rapid economic restructuring in human history. So let me actually compare this to the dilemma of sociologists or social scientists in general, right? Because society changes so fast, right? We have to worry about all these different new issues all the time. But if you're like a professor employed at university or at the government, official, as you have job tenure. But if you're sheer, capitalist, job market, right, then all this, successful economic restructuring implies that you're not going to be there anymore. You have to struggle with the success of your national economy. So I don't know whether I answered your question, but
that's wonderful. That explains
yeah.
so much. Thank you so much. And now let's talk about culture. You write that this is a really interesting quote, so I'm just going to read the whole quote. The nationalist goal of catching up with the West became a surrogate philosophy in itself. While family-led Neo-Confucian norms and rituals have been widely upheld, they have not been socially extrapolated into any consistent cultural or ideological order. I think that's so fascinating. So welcome your explanation. And I also want to add a question that we got from Professor David Tizard from Seoul Women's University, who's written a lot and responded to your work, reacted from your work. So that's great that he tuned in and asked a question. He asked, what would a world of realized dongdoseogi, East-West philosophies coexisting, what would that actually look like? And does it offer a solution to the ills of compressed modernity?
Yeah. let me start with the kind of structural, you know, of Korean liberalism. I think Korean liberalism system, stands on some kind of tripodic platform, like camera, tripod. One is the institutional, sphere, the formal institutional sphere. Two is the practical problem-solving sphere, and three is the cultural sector, cultural sphere. Okay, I explained the relationship between the institutional sphere and the practical problem-solving sphere in terms of its normal corruption, the utilitarian institution dualities. Okay, they are solving problems aside from the institutional, stipulations and legal stipulations. And both of these, the spheres, material spheres, if you like, are really, supported or sustained by, strong, consistent, ideational or philosophical, foundations and principles. On the other hand, your immediate, material situation and also political and other, the physical situations require you to focus on the strategic ways by which you can most effectively survive collectively, especially. So, not only Korea, but all those former colonies would have the same kind of the exigencies, right, after liberation. So they above all they experienced the capitalism during colonial era as a collective, issue, right? I mean, they were colonized by the capitalist, imperialist countries, right? That capitalism was first experienced not as kind of personal, economic, matter, but as race to race, nation to nation, domination and kind of issues, right? So after liberation, it's quite natural that these post-colonial liberated nations will try to think about capitalism, liberalism in general, as a kind of collective project for surviving, and or even actually taking revenge, against your former colonized. So, so this collective survival, especially as embodied and embedded in this statist ideology of rich nation, strong army, kind of logic, was so dominant and even ideologically required in the frame of national security law. So you're asked to respect liberalism. I'm not thinking about any criticism about liberalism. Okay, so you have freedom not to deny, freedom as defined by the state. So, so this international relationship, issues as defined and understood and explained, educated by the state to people who are actually overriding any social and other problematics. Though on the other hand, the same very similar the ideological and social orientation were developed among individual citizens with their family as a basic unit of survival. Okay, so for instance, we have the developmental state, what's called developmental state, but I can also say that we have developmental family. Okay, so there is this alliance between developmental state and developmental family in Korea. Uh, 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 so so this the family is important. Family, unlike the state, has been able to revive their traditional values and customs. The new Confucian,
Right.
that we're under liberal the state, and liberal state didn't really much to do deal with these social and cultural spheres of society, right? So people were left to themselves. They should try to dignify themselves by becoming Confucian in their family relations, rituals, etc. Right. So as Korea, began to recover their economic status, economic conditions, and people began to get richer, etc. That they Koreans, all of them were so happy to use their the affluence, material stability in practicing Confucian and models, ethics, etc. But this was not actually translated into the society and state becoming any Confucian like that, except Park Chung-hee era, where when he actually was preaching, Park Chung-hee tried to identify himself as some kind of the parental-like state leader, something like that. Okay. So let me
Okay.
just finish here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think higher ed's important.
Okay, so
you're our expert here at the Career Study on higher ed.
because you're speaking about families, and I thought there's a nice segue into that. But I did have a question about the educational system, again, which is something near and dear to my heart. One of the structural risks that you identify is worsening intellectual and cultural dependency. And can you elaborate perhaps briefly on this risk's impact on the role and structure of higher education in Korea as it prepares the next generations
Right.
to move forward in this climate?
Yeah. I think I have the most critical part of my answer already, gave it to you to answer the previous question about, the current government, etc. But anyhow, just to, confess, on behalf of my university and other universities in general in Korea, that our university system, educational and also research system, is still operating according to 20th century regime of institutional modernization. In other words, we, in order to become like, advanced Western countries, what's called 선진화 is becoming advanced. Okay, we thought that we have to, adopt all these Western institutions, legal systems and government structures, and even these, the knowledges, taught to students, and the knowledge is encouraged by the government to research by, among the scholars. They, a lot of them actually, most of them, I don't know. Different, scholars, different, department will have different thoughts about this. But in general, we, our mission is to become like the best universities in the United States, for instance. How would you become like that. It's not by researching our own society and developing our own thoughts, but rather actually replicating what is practiced in the Western countries. Now it is neoliberal educational neoliberalization regime is here to make not only Korean universities but so many universities in Asia and even in Europe to copy American actually the university system because they are pressurized to publish in major journals, which are dominated by the American academics, etc. Right? So um, I don't know. I mean, this reminds me of the Barack Obama saying or complaining that America has such huge and then excellent universities and scholars etc. But we have very rare answers to our structural problems, and he was complaining that, right? I Right, the same. I mean, I cannot complain. I don't have, any right to complain because I'm myself academic. But
Exactly.
as part of the system, I'm so sorry that we are not doing our service properly. Yeah. So we this is kind of the inertia, that path-dependent inertia that the 20th century system of this educational, institutional development is still here, and they are practicing this education the same way. And also, because this is knowledge, transferred from the advanced civilization, supposedly advanced the countries, that they are taken as correct answers. Okay, so we are able to make our students to take exams which presuppose some kind of correct answers. So we can afford to make our students to take, for instance, a lot of the multiple choice exam tests. Okay, so I don't think we solving overcoming this inertia.
This
And
is so
but on the
interesting.
other hand, there are a lot of problems have been accumulated, etc. So, um, um, but on the other hand, it's not only Korea, being unable to overcome this contradiction, but also actually these contradictions are actually shared by other countries now,
Right, right. And
increasingly in
and
this
I mean,
neoliberal.
you earlier you apologize. I don't think you have any need to apologize because, like, when I think about some of the problems of Korean education, and having participated as a student and a teacher in the Korean educational system myself, you have Juip Gyoyuk on the one hand, that education by injection, right? Just the memorization, and then you have Cham Gyoyuk on the other hand, which is the real authentic education, which cares very much about the intellectual development of the students. And I experienced both in Korea. And you, as a teacher, are very much in the chamgyoyu side of authentic education, encouraging us to really ponder deeply and reflect upon some preconceived notions. And so, thank you for that. And on behalf of all your students, thank you. And now I want to
Um,
pick up on families, which is a topic
yeah.
that we touched on earlier and is so important. So the simple question is, how has compressed modernity affected families in Korea? And I'll just provide a quote from the book to help start off the conversation. South Korean families have functioned as a very effective receptacle for the nation's highly compressed conditions of modernity. It is as much to do with the success of South Korean families as an engine of compressed modernity as due to their failure that they have become functionally overloaded and socially risk-ridden. So much to unpack there. So over to you.
um, Korea, I wrote in 2018 a book in Korean. This is entitled "The End of Tomorrow?" Question mark, and familial liberalism and social reproduction crisis. And here I'm arguing that in Korean liberalism, the practical liberalism, the problem-solving liberalism, the unit of that liberalism is family, not individual. Okay, that on the one hand. On the other hand, in chapter 8 of my previous book, The Logic of Compressed Modernity, I explained the Korean family serving as some kind of comprehensive multi-purpose social infrastructure under the condition of the social institutional deficits in a time of Korea pursuing a lot of these economic, other purposes, right? So family has been very effective, and also as society and economy, rapidly developed, that family function enables the family to enrich itself. Family got rewards, from those services functions, and that in the process, the family relationships got strengthened because they were able to share the benefits of this rapid development, and then the parents will, think that I was right in forcing my students, study very hard and get into, good universities, and then enter the best, industries and etc. But since the late 90s, not only because of this neoliberal, globalization and financial crisis, etc., but also we have, graduated from the the labor or human-based, the regime of economic development. We have entered the financial capitalism, stage. We have entered this kind of global, offshoring stage, in which our industry mostly create jobs for in foreign territories. These are all familiar, phenomena in the United States, right? And these are the things which are responsible for the rise of this Trumpianism in many corners of the United States. So, so with the family in this process is exposed to a lot of these, side effects, the risks of this new stage, new processes of economic and other transformations. So now the competition is worse, and the likelihood of getting, benefits from, for instance, your investment in your children's education is lower, etc. So, and on the other hand, we have job market crisis in terms of the young people having trouble in getting into stable industries, etc. So these contradictions and problems have been translated into family relationships becoming the sources of stress. So so the family is now under pressure, stress, etc. So this makes young people to think about their own lives differently from their parents' generations.
Exactly. And
If
I
you,
just,
yeah,
okay, just drilling down on that a bit, and the aspect and the contradictions and the tension. If we can explore a bit, what you address in chapter 6 is this increasing prevalent phenomenon of marriage deferral and avoidance by women. But you say the contradiction, and it's fascinating to me, is you say these trends do not suggest a transition to an individualistic society, but rather underscore women's true interest in family. I think this is an interesting contradiction, or seemingly a contradiction and a key tension. And so can you sort of take a couple of minutes to unpack this for us, to
Right.
explore
Yeah.
a little bit further.
Right. Why this precious to family? Koreans are still, they are still maintaining. They haven't really developed alternative ways of planning and managing their lives. Okay, so if you're married at all, right, and if you have children, then you're not going to be much different from your parent generation in terms of dealing with your children's education so intensively, and also in terms of if couples are expecting each other in terms of a lot of family service duties and etc. So for instance, we have very low fertility rates, right? So a lot of young couples don't have children, but most of them still have children, just one child actually, and then this one child will be given the best and the worst pressure from their parents in terms of being sent to the English kindergarten at the age of 4, this kind of issues, right? So they haven't really changed the ways they think of family and the ways they deal with each other as the familiar subjects, etc. Right? So if you think about this necessity or this norm, you have to be very careful if we are prepared to do this. It's unthinkable that you can marry and then you will have different kind of married life than your parent generation. And I'm not going to have child at all, and I'm not going to think about sending my children to the cramming institutions, etc. But rather I will have very much liberated free romantic kind of family life. That's not the case. So they have been dealing with this issue, this dilemma, by delaying the marriage or postponing, delaying the marriage or giving up the marriage or breaking the marriages instead of changing the family culture itself. So, but on the other hand, let me indicate the fact that even the recent surveys show again and again the majority of young people in Korea, as well as their parent generation, are still, positive. I mean, they think that they are not going to, deny the possibility of their marriage and family if it is possible at all. So this is the Korean dilemma now. This is the issue the Korean government has tackled in order to revive the fertility rate.
Thank you
And
so
this is very actually general, not only in Korea but also in Japan and even
right.
Taiwan and Singapore. It's very generalized in the situation actually.
Okay, thank you so much. To me, it's just very fascinating, this whole aspect. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleague, Chelsie Alexandre, Program Officer in Policy, and she's going to be handling our audience and participants' questions. Over to you, Chelsie.
Thanks so much, Toby, and thank you to Professor Chang and Jonathan for very engaging discussion. I was in the wings taking my own notes, and I've kind of slid in here in order to take over the audience Q&A. I think this topic from the first video to today has garnered a lot of interest. among our audience. And so I have a few questions here for you, but I also urge our online viewers to send any more questions by emailing policy@koreasociety.org. And as a quick reminder to our online viewers, we do prioritize questions from our Korea Society members. So please consider becoming a member today. So just to kick us off, we have a question from a Korea Society member, Charlie Kimball. He asks, how can we improve innovation in Asian societies like South Korea and Japan? And I kind of want to add to that in a way that deconflicts the tension that we've been talking about this entire conversation between compressed modernity and its risks and problems. So over to you, Professor Chang.
The innovation is so much emphasized in Korean society. I'm not really, the qualified person to explain this, but I have the impression that the innovation comes from crisis, contradictions, actually. So also innovation comes from this the institutional dualities, because the institutions and then also even technologies they adopted from Western countries wouldn't solve immediate problems, right? So they had to somehow reinvent them or modify them or manipulate or even distort them to solve the problem. So we have very many, very inventive, innovative, institutions and also practices and other, skills and etc. But many of them are actually not recognized as justifiable innovations. The most important of all is our Jebel system. Okay, Samsung can or this conglomerate system, right? But we cannot do away with them because they are responsible for this, rapid and strong, economic performance and so on. So the Jebel system is not copyable elsewhere easily. Okay, so it is our invention, it is our innovation in our industrial system in a way, and also there are other aspects of it. But in general, I would say that actually South Korean society and economy have been very good at innovation. Well, the limit of Korean innovation is that they have been, concentrating themselves in problem solving, practical problem solving, right? So the fundamental basis, scientific, philosophical, and other basis, necessarily, strong enough, because our national efforts and resources and social and personal energies have been devoted to practically innovating knowledge and technologies and institutions, etc. Right. So now we will have this fundamental issue question that how long this kind of this condition, this situation, this achievement can last without having better, more fundamentally sound in technological, scientific, and philosophical foundations. Did I answer?
Yeah.
This is very abstract way of answering this question, but
No, I think that
just
was
want to
great.
emphasize fundamentals are fundamental. Yeah?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's a great answer. It's almost inextricable from each other, but hopefully there will be that increasing innovation and more fundamentally sound. So we have another question from Oksundang. She asks, since you're obviously very well versed in this topic of compressed modernity, in general, how aware are South Koreans about the seriousness of compressed modernity and its risks?
When I write books in English, about compressed modernity, right? Also write in Korean, too. I'm not really writing about anything secret. Okay, I'm using, the all the things I, experience and confront every day. So all Koreans know about this.
Mhm.
But I just want to show that there are some systemic patterns, orders behind all those, uniquely Korean, phenomena. So you have to respect your realities as some kind of scientific system. Okay, they may be different from the American systems or European systems, but still we have some kind of logic and systemic, logic behind our economic, social, and phenomena and such. So I think when I say this, when I write about this, I feel sorry that my the my orientation and my problematic my purpose is not fully shared with my comrades, universities, and in society in general. And sometimes the journalists and anthropologists are very happy about me actually revealing all this Korean, uniqueness as a basis for the Korean systemic Koreanness and so on. So, so I should actually keep explaining
Yeah.
and persuading Koreans to love their realities as the scientific values. I mean, this is done actually different way by actually Hangang, Nobel laureate Hangang, and the movie makers and etc. Right? They all make sense of Korean realities. And if you watch Korean cinemas, read Hangang novel, and said it's all about Korean miseries and contradictions and etc. Right? But you can become civilizationally established, dignified by making sense of your own realities and contradictions from a more philosophical,
Absolutely.
yeah, in philosophical enlightening ways. So
Yeah.
it is compressed modernity is kind of tool,
Yep.
my tool
Yeah.
to pursue, that purpose. And I'm so thankful to, the people in the cultural sector, including, the Hangang and also Bong Joon-ho, all these people. I'm so thankful that, but, the proposed teacher, right? The question was actually earlier related to the another question.
Mhm.
We're going to actually introduce this question, or can I just?
I think we're running low on time, but I did want to
Okay.
say
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you to
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, should we just do the question? All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Why don't we? It's the last one. The breakneck pace of economic development.
Exactly.
Yeah, this one.
Mhm.
So yes, given the breakneck pace of economic development in Northeast Asia, it's perhaps unsurprising that your work on compressed modernity has found interest in application outside of Korea. Notably, there's a widespread Chinese readership for your
It's a
books.
China thing. Okay. Okay.
Hmm. So can you
Let me.
compare?
I'll just the answer just 30 seconds to
Let's do
David
it.
Professor teacher about this. The Eastern philosophy and Western, instrument, etc.
Mhm.
Thing is that and Korean, these industries and the government, etc., have been running without worrying too much about the philosophical and civilizational, the aspects of Korean modernity. But it doesn't mean that actually the Korean, philosophy and religion and all this were actually totally absent, right? They were taught at universities, etc. But the most important actually problem here is that they were so separated. Okay, so even though you learn Korean philosophy and religion, etc., right, they wouldn't be relevant in your real, activities. So, so the answering to Professor Teacher that even if I mean, we have been actually dealing with this both this the Eastern philosophy and Western instruments, but in a very problemable way. To answer the final question about the China. All my books on compressed modernity have been translated into Chinese by major Chinese universities. And I even got actually book award last year for the Chinese edition of my 2010 book, South Korea under Compressed Modernity. I didn't get book award for that in English version, but it ended up actually being awarded. I think the China, I was actually even asked, invited by the Chinese Academy of Social Science to collaborate with them in developing in the theory of the modernization with the Chinese characteristics. This is a serious thing actually in China because it is kind of formal, theory of the Chinese modernization as distinguished from the Western, modernity and modernization, etc. And then, but on the other hand, they want to do this rather seriously. And then they see a lot of actual problems, contradictions South Koreans are going through have actually, corresponding, developments in China. And I was so surprised that Chinese are reading my book as indirect analysis of Chinese realities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is amazing. And just to go back to
Yeah, so
an
I
earlier
ended
point.
up actually making book contract to write a book, Chinese compressed modernity, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very clear. There's no doubt that you've made great contributions to this field with your writings and elucidating the unique Korean case. And so I actually think we'll probably wrap up there, but I would like to ask everyone here, Linda and Jonathan, and also our online viewers to join me in thanking Professor Chang for such a thoughtful discussion. So just, yes, little claps
Thank you
here
very
and there.
much.
Yeah, of course. And for those who are interested, you can learn more about how to purchase this book if you head over to the Korea Society website. Definitely encourage you to do so. We have our own copies here at the Korea Society. And if you enjoyed today's program, I want you to please consider tuning into some upcoming events we have here. You can join us next Thursday, October 16th at 12 p.m. for a discussion with two Liberty in North Korea Link advocacy fellows to hear firsthand about the realities of life in North Korea, the decision and process of leaving, their adjustments to new life in South Korea, etc. And that event will be in person here at 350 Madison Avenue and live streamed. The following Thursday, October 23rd at 12 p.m., we will host Ambassador Phil Goldberg and Kate Katluwiskis at McLarty Associates for an APEC Primer program. So what can we expect at the upcoming APEC Summit taking place this year in Gyeongju, South Korea? This discussion will also be in person here at the Korea Society and online. So feel free to head over to our website to learn more and register to join us. And I just want to give a huge thank you again to Professor Chang and Jonathan and Linda for a great discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I look forward to catching up in person sometime, always.
Absolutely. Thank
Bye.
you.